Good morning. Happy Friday,
Woo.
LinkedIn, YouTube. Welcome to another episode of Let's Build HubSpot Properties with Matthew. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I'm glad to be back. Got over the whatever winter flu came through my house last week,
Yeah,
which is I'm very grateful for. But
that's good. It's
yeah,
good to
no,
have you
I'm
back.
doing great. And I mean, I think not that I planned sicknesses at all, but like it seems like we picked a good week because this week it's chock full of new features and lots of little changes that we're gonna we're gonna have to dive. I don't know if we're gonna have time to dive into all of them, to be
We
honest.
definitely won't. I'm hitting this
We
stuff
never have time.
every day, and I cannot catch up to the What's New to You page. Like I cannot get to zero. I can't get to, is that a new like inbox zero for admins maybe?
Yes,
Like,
that's in my zero is like have I done everything I need to do? Um, I mean, I there's a couple of things that there's two things I have to talk about. One is because I feel like everyone's gonna be mad if we don't talk about rejects. Because that's a huge thing. Of course, now I can't find it. That's what I get for having too many.
is
Is
that
it
the official
live?
way to say it, by the way? I've never seen that
I'm
term.
I'm going with that.
Um, okay,
That's what
okay.
we're gonna say.
Short
Um,
for regular expression. Uh, I can pull it up to you. There it is. Regular
what's it called?
expressions
Oh, regular
for
expression.
property. Yeah, if you put in regex,
There we
you're not
go.
gonna hit it. For property validations. I'll go
Yeah.
ahead and share my screen while you
Oh, yeah.
talk
I
about it.
think I went down, when I found this, I went down a rabbit hole, which was like, is this just that we can validate? These are the five. I just was like, is it only these three things we can validate for, or is there like a larger, like, I can now pick certain things? And how I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, we can now go in here and like we can set rules. Or like if you have an previously you could only do like something that was a problem that I've experienced before is we use in ed tech we use NCSID. It's like a national identifying number for like schools and districts. The problem that you'd encounter is often there'd be leading zeros. So like in HubSpot, HubSpot hates leading zeros. And what's worse is if you ever export data and import data to HubSpot with leading zeros, somehow it magically disappears. It's a brilliant skill that it has. So like I think these are super important because it's going to always say like no, you have to have X number of digits and you can have leading zeros because before you could do it has to be so many characters on a single line text field, but you couldn't do that with number. Like if you set the number to be it has to be six numbers that are six digits with a leading zero. You couldn't do that. You had to make it text that was six characters. Um, so I think things like this, like being able to do like 5-digit postal code, because that's an example of a good one with leading zeros in it. Um, these is really good. Like, and I think we're getting closer and closer to, I hope, a world where we can dedupe before we create. And then I don't know if you saw that. There's a thread in Sprocketeer for those of you who are in Sprocketeer we were talking about this at length um, of how do I prevent duplicates before they start? And the answer today is you kind of can't. You can if you have the right, if you have an industry that has some sort of unique identifier that you can call on, but you really can't. And like that's HubSpot does it a
Right.
little bit with domains, but it gets hard, and especially when you like I live in a world where in education we have schools and districts, and those are unique companies, but they share a domain. So how do I
Right.
make sure that I'm associating people to the right domain, like to the right company without manually like having to manually do it? So it's it's a good improvement. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, well, to that point you just made, like it's as easy as is there a unique ID or not? Like if
Yeah,
not, then you cannot prevent, you know, I shouldn't say cannot. It's very difficult. And most people are going to err on the side of letting the dupe in instead of like stopping valuable data, from coming in, because usually then it's a combination of 2 to 10 fields that you're trying to match and see, right? And AI is going to help with this, I think, a lot very
yeah,
soon. But these rules, like, are going to be very powerful in terms of um, like formatting data just the way that you need to. Uh, but I think a key here, like again, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
Enter a custom validation error message that will be shown when a user adds an invalid value. This will help
Yeah.
the user understand what data should be entered into this property. So
I mean,
please, as you do
frankly,
that, do not
my
say error. Like, like,
no, what well, first of all, it's either gonna have to say error contact admin because that's the de facto answer you always put in there. Um, or alternatively, can I load a GIF there of the guy from Jurassic Park going nah just over and over again. Um, if we can get on that, I know you can do that like with Supered. That was one of the selling points of
oh
me in Supered is I
man.
could put a GIF up with a warning message, and I was like, well, it's just going to be the guy. I can't remember his name. I'm not a Jurassic Park fan, in case you can't tell. But like, just like you're going um, so I think there's like I do like that they put it there 'cause I think there's a lot of things in HubSpot where you want an error message to display, but like the error message just is not contextual enough for an end user. And I'm glad they include that as part of the beta. It's not a later
Yeah.
in life update.
Yeah.
I
And
think
I
that's
guess we should
important.
highlight the fact that this is private beta right now.
It is a
So
private beta.
you'll have to
So
sign
I
up.
think it's
But
accepting most people very quickly. It's not like there's a couple private betas out there that take a while. This one was pretty quick because I think I already have it. I don't think I signed up
yeah.
for like on Monday or Tuesday. In private beta land, actually, there's something I have right now that's in private beta. It's in very what's the right term to say, like very limited private beta. So it's not accessible on. It showed up in my product updates, but I don't think it's available to everyone. Which is nested index associations.
What? I'm trying
Here
to grab it. Yeah.
I'll show you the I'll show you if you let me see if you're currently sharing. I can kind of
Okay.
show you what it looks like. Um, I gotta find the
I
right.
mean, nested anything definitely gets
I
my
know, right?
attention. Um,
Okay, here we go. Okay, so what it is this, and this is not. There's actually when I signed up for this, they sent me a GIF of it. Sorry, that's what I got. Yeah, that's the face I made when I found out this. So it's very, and I will say this, it's very early in the beta,
oh,
and I love this because about 6 months ago, I was talking to someone at on the UX team about it was a different conversation we were having. It was about something else. And I was like, what's one thing you really want? And I was like, I would love if I could just show associations in a table view inside another table view. And they're like, we'll let you know. And I'm like, okay. And then the other day I got an email from the PM on this one, which was, can you want to join this beta? I'm like, yes, please. It does have some, like I don't say when I say the rough edges now, like it doesn't operate well with custom objects, doesn't operate well with like any of the newer Commerce Hub objects. But like for your standard, your contest companies, tickets, deals, it's amazing. And if you're someone like me who has really leaned heavily into association labels, now that you
yes.
can show association labels as a column, you can say like company to company funder or company to company school. That's something that we use. You can then show a list of records, just like you
That's
would now.
powerful.
It is like the old index page. If you remember back in the old days, a year and a half ago, when you could edit inline on the index page, you can't edit inline on that in nested index, but it is a really awesome way to not have to navigate around. And it goes back to the question we had, I think, 3 or 4 weeks ago. We were talking about like HubSpot is starting to has done a lot to level up for end users, but it's now starting to level up for middle managers. Like I know a ton of middle managers who use index pages daily. Like that is where they live because they're monitoring multiple accounts, multiple records at a time. Being able to say, cool, I can pull up a customer and then all their deals or all their tickets, or see the last 5 tickets without having to click into that company to do it is huge.
Yeah.
Um, I think that is really a really great way to bring more data to the forefront of what you're working on.
Yeah.
Um,
It's just the man, because this is another curation basically of data that we know to be existing in the portal and sometimes
yeah.
in this format. Like, right, that's where a big challenge, especially for non-admins, is when a user experiences something in one place and then they don't understand why they can't experience it the exact
Mhm.
same way in another place. And when you don't have this, you have to click in, and then maybe if you're lucky, there's an association card like on that record, and it shows
Yep.
exactly what we're seeing here. And that's where it's like, if we can do it over there, like, how do we do it over here? Because if we do it over
Yep.
here, now I don't have to click into the record, right? Or I don't have to click preview and then scroll, and, right?
My
So
biggest thing
this
is the
is
amount of times this
beautiful.
removes the need for like extra views because people are creating views where they're putting extreme filtering on them, and they're like, "Well, I want to filter. I can see this company's associated companies as a view." Whereas now they don't have to do that. They can just have one view, and it has all like you can see your parent companies with your child companies, your companies with your tickets, your companies with their deals. Like that is amazing in my view. I think there's a lot of value in this as it kind of grows. And the thing that it reminds me a lot of is that I don't think a lot of people use the preview pane, and I could be wrong. I will take a knee on that one. The preview pane is underrated. I've recently discovered the preview pane has made my life a lot easier in places where I just wasn't using it. And I really should spend, please go and actually like customize your preview pane because it can actually be very useful if you use it properly, as I have learned recently. But like for example, things like invoices, when you pull up invoices, it only pulls up in the preview pane. You can't see like
Yes.
that inline, you can't see like
Welcome, welcome to Commerce
that.
Hub, my friend.
Um,
Preview pane city.
so So like this, like it's I tested it, I was on a call with the product manager for this, and I was like, does it work with invoices? And she's like, well, as long as it's an associated object, we could show any data on the card. So like it doesn't work in the same way it doesn't work
Right.
custom object now, it just shows a record ID. And her
Yeah.
reasoning for that was very valid, which was that you can't see she's like, because custom objects, we don't know what properties you want to see. Like it's just we don't know what your default like assets are
Okay.
going to be.
Yeah.
And then right now you can't customize how that looks, what that preview pane looks like. Like and that's it's very, very early, very rough in the edges, but I think there's a ton of ability here to create an experience that just makes life easier for your end users and
Yeah.
makes
And
properties
I like it.
for most.
It's another thing that's going to force people to use association labels properly if
Yes.
they want this
Oh my God,
experience,
yes.
right?
Can I like so here's my I'm gonna get my association label high horse. There is no great way. I think I've got it down pat now. If I want to enforce an association label, so let's say I'm on a deal. This is an example I literally just went through this. I'm like, I'm on a deal and I want to make sure you have a deal decision maker identified as an association label, and I don't want you to move it to the next stage until you've done that. How would you make sure that happens?
I wouldn't I wouldn't know. I feel like there's been a recent beta or something that relates to
So now
validation and
you can
association
enforce
labels.
association labels on creation. So like you can say now when you create a record, you can now say you have to include a primary company versus just a company, or you must include like a deal decision maker as a contact. Um, but once that record is created, that doesn't exist. Like there's no like validation in place. And like I do it right now through a series of I think it's one workflow and one property. So I create a single drop down property that's like essentially a yes no field, though I prefer to use drop down because I can be more descriptive than just yes no. But I make a yes, like essentially a drop down select, and I make it view only, so only admins can touch it. And then you make that your required property on your conditional logic. And then I have a workflow that runs that says whenever any record is associated to this, like let's say it's a deal to contact, any contact with the association label deal decision maker is added to a company, set that property to yes. And then the only issue I have with it sometimes the reruns an issue. Re-enrollment's a little bit of an issue, but usually with this sort of stuff, you don't necessarily need to re-enroll. Once you do it once, you're good. Um, but then that way you can't move forward in the process unless that property is filled. And that property can only be filled by that workflow. But it's creating additional properties, which isn't always fun to
Right.
enforce a rule. And it
But
works. And I
there's
try not to do it that often, but it's something you can do to get around trying to enforce association labels. But I wish there was a way, to your point, I wish there was a way to say enforce association labels in the I don't call it conditional logic, but like I guess it is. It's like OG conditional logic, which is like when you move stuff between stages, you can't move it till you do X. Um, before conditional logic overall was a thing. I wish that was something that was enforced natively in HubSpot. 'Cause I think it'd be so much easier to be like, do you have a decision maker? Do you have an associated company? Things like that.
Yeah. No, I think like, and this is one of those places like if you do need to create an extra property, do it. Like people are just so undervaluing association labels right
You
now.
don't have to put every
Eh,
property on your records, kids. Like that's what I tell people is like it's okay to create properties that you can't see if they're
Right.
serving a purpose.
Yeah. And this is
Tell me
one
that
of the
all the
best
time.
purposes
Right.
because if you get this part right, and it's going to continue going like this index, this nested index thing is an example of how this functionality specifically you will be able to realize it if you're doing association labels well, right?
Yeah.
If you're not, and that's it activates so much of the rest of the HubSpot tool set is doing these association labels right. And it doesn't feel like that far-fetched to say like if you're not doing it right, the value of AI will be significantly decreased for you because
Yeah.
that's how AI can serve you relevant information because there's relevant associated information with the thing you're trying to get done,
Yeah.
right? So really taking the time to understand like manually first, right? Like what do we need to associate to these objects and when? Like you gave a great example of like
Yeah.
you better not put it in this deal stage if there's no like person XYZ identified.
But I mean, I will fight the good fight, which is that I don't think I've worked at an org at all where I don't have to enforce some people get very like defensive about like building requirement like enforcement policies in your CRM. Like, why are you having to enforce? You should have to enforce this. It should be something that you can trust your team to do. I'd love to trust my team to do it, but they're humans and they forget. So like that's a nice bad. There's another thing I could say there too, but I'm not going to say it because we're on LinkedIn Live. But they're humans and they forget a lot. And when you go to scale, like they're not going to remember a process. And like the more I think it's healthy to put process front and center where you can. If that means putting enforcement rules in place and putting validation rules in place and putting stage change rules in place that prevent them from moving forward till they've done certain steps, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it keeps your sales reps in a focus and an emotion um, that lets them go. Now, I will argue that there's a benefit to like how many things you require at each stage. That's a question of whether your stage is set up correctly. But maybe you need an additional stage to like help spread that gap out. But I think there's value in that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's where it's like, is it in like this, whenever we create rules for people to follow, like, is it for the company? Is it for them? Is it for this
Yeah,
team? Right? Because usually, especially when it's like the HubSpot of old and there's marketing purposes for why we brought it in and now we want sales and
yeah,
marketing is like, oh, I need this piece of data and I need this piece of data and and none of it matters to the salesperson, nor is it
right,
going to help us close any deals. Like that's different. Like please don't put a bunch of required fields on your create form just because you
right.
want it, right? But then when there's stage stuff that matters and we know and everybody's agreed at this point that if this person is involved in the deal, we win it every time.
Mhm.
So like making sure that happens in the process is in the best interest of the salesperson and the company. So usually it's not even hard to get buy-in. Like the people that are invested in that, invested in themselves and the success of the company, it's like, oh yeah, please help me remember that every time. Like,
Yeah,
because I will forget.
yeah, no, 100%. I think it's filling in properties is important, and I think that understanding what properties you're getting used is very valuable to like keeping your properties clean. And we talk about that a lot, which is, are you getting the fill rate you need on properties? And I'm trying to make a terrible segue here to what's currently on the screen, which is data quality has now come to report viewer. Which is I will say is this is an Ops Pro and Ops Enterprise. Unfortunately, it's not in. It feels like it should be something that should be just in all professional, but I will get off my high horse on that. But if you have Operations Hub, you will be familiar with data quality tools that exist in there. One of them is fill rate, which lets you see how many records have a value for a specific property. It is super valuable in my opinion because it gives you the ability to see, am I reporting on something that's actually going to give me good data? And it's great for enabling non-administrators to build better reports because I firmly believe that as a HubSpot administrator, you will fail at your role if you do everything for everyone. You have to give up some you own a lot of responsibilities as an administrator, but you have to give up ownership of certain things in order to enable your team to be more comfortable in the platform. And like one of the first things that one of the most common ones I'll see is they're like, I don't want anyone creating reports. I'll create reports. And I'm like, that's a the recipe for you to have no hours in the day to do anything productive.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm doing that right now with one of my teams. They want new reports, and we're helping them build them out. But you cannot like you've got to let your teams feel comfortable in pulling reports and know what they're pulling. And it's a great lesson that can you have someone with a mediocre level of understanding in HubSpot pull a report for what they're looking for. I'm in a position now with one at Ignite where I have members of like a team that can pull reports relatively well, and they'll reach out to me just like, "Hey, I'm trying to pull this. I don't think I'm doing it right." And then like, well, I'll step in and like, "Oh yeah, you just need to change your associations, or you're pulling from the wrong property." But things like data quality here are super good for that because it tells you like, am I pulling a reel that has like a 20% fill rate? Like that's why your data is not going to look right. That's why your data is going to be incomplete. It's a really good way to see like is what I'm pulling even worth pulling. So I love that it brought it to the report view because essentially it's saying like for each of your reports you can see like, is this report actually useful? Is the data there?
Yeah, and what does the data is actually telling us? Like, how many times have you? Well, I know, I should say for myself, like you have the dashboard looking the way you want, and then you didn't get to actually review it before the meeting. And then
Yeah.
somebody's like, "Oh, click on that 5 deals. Looks like we did well there. Oh, oh yeah. Um, looks like it's because of this one deal, or there's a couple test deals in there."
Hmm.
And like being able to understand the data quality, and just like as an aside, and just some uh, just some coping I have to do right now. Like I'm going over these every day in the morning, these updates.
Yeah.
And there was one day where I like accidentally like clicked off the new to you screen, and
Yeah.
then I wouldn't go back to it because I knew it would just take off another 10 and I didn't have time to review them on the episode that day. So I searched for this one and it was definitely one of those that was like just I missed, and I would have loved
Yeah.
being able to go over it. And I'm definitely clicking join beta um, on that one because this is some of my most well-intentioned spreadsheets that I've pulled trying to do data management have these rows on the top where it's like
Yeah.
percentage of fill, and
Yeah.
it's like it's it's important to like when you can bring that up in a conversation, and it's like, oh, we need this field and we need this field and we need to know this. And it's like, do we? Because nobody's filling it in.
Yeah.
Like, I'm happy to enforce filling it in, but let's
Yeah.
first think about why do we actually need it, right?
I I think we talked about this before, I'm pretty sure. There is so much value in reviewing your properties and taking that step of going through, even if you don't have operations up, because there's a lot easier to do an operations up because there's a district place you can go. But like if you go into properties, like in general, and then you just pick, like, for example, we have this one here. Like used in is like underappreciated. And I think it's super important to see like where are you using your properties today? Like we are using this which we're no longer using it. But well, it's because we switched to a new version of it. But we use it in 93 places. That's primarily used in forms. You can tell it's a marketing property. Like it's used primarily in forms. But it's I think it's wild to see like if we're using it in forms and it's nowhere else, then why are we bothering collecting it? That's something that you have to ask yourself. Like if you're not using it as part of a workflow, or you're not using it as part of a view, which it's very telling because users make their views for the most part. You know, is it shown anywhere? Is it required another step later? Like where are you using it? I think that a lot of people um don't appreciate the value in checking like where your product is actually getting used. And like it's very easy, like we said, like I argue like you should make properties if you have a need for them, but it's important to iterate and be an iterative mindset. I can't remember who said that
Yeah.
recently this week. I saw it somebody new on
Almost.
LinkedIn, but you've got to go back and check. Like it's very easy to just build and not actually create. You just create debt. And the minute you start saying to yourself, "Hey, let's take a month, a quarter, depending on what your company is, a month, a quarter, a week, and just go through and make sure are we utilizing every property on the contact record? And if we are utilizing it, great. We're not utilizing it, why? And what can we do to change that? Or can we review how we show these views to people so they're using them correctly? I think there's so much more control now over how you show things to people. We can do team-based views. We can with the new view builder that lets you kind of customize the sidebars and the center cards in one view. The unified, I think, is unified record builder. Is
Yeah.
what it's technically called. Like that, gives you so much more flexibility to show stuff where you need to show it, and like using tabs if you have that functionality, which I learned the other day is something I think is included in professional. If you don't have professional, you don't get the ability to do tabs.
Also
Um,
included in all enterprise now,
yeah,
including Content Hub. Yeah, some of those random things that have been attached to Sales Hub and Service Hub only
yeah.
when it comes to CRM customization are making their way to the other enterprise. And it's a beautiful thing, including
Mm,
an extra tab. But to your point, like I went over the Reddit thread this morning where admin joins a company where HubSpot's for marketing, Salesforce is for CRM, 200,000 contacts. They've never set up lifecycle stages. They're
love
all
that.
listed as leads, but we have 630 properties, 400 plus of which are unused and exist for no reason I can identify.
The sort of chaotic neutral, like the chaotic evil in me is just like, I'm just gonna delete these and like see how long it is before someone notices. Like I like
Right.
there's part of me is like, I mean, I look at ours like right now, I'm looking at our contact, we have 315 contact properties right now. Um, and like there's a couple, are used heavily, but like if I filter even by that, there's a lot in here and some of them, I will say some of them are HubSpot properties. So like I can't, you know, we can't hate on HubSpot, and there's new some of them are misnomers because using can be a misnomer. For example, like one of them in here is what was it? Oh, it's like
Well,
time, like date entered something. Like it said it's used nowhere because it's not used anywhere, but like it's still getting filled as a fill rate.
right.
Um, I think there's a certain amount of you have to understand your properties really well. And I think it's helpful to just take the minute and like I'm living this world right now because we're doing a lot of attribution work and understanding attribution reporting, um, which is a pseudoscience to say the least, in its own right. But it's doing that has taught me a lot about property management for contacts and for leads. Like I don't know if you've really dived into leads yet, Chris, but we're kind of almost using leads to help firm up some of our attribution logic. Because when you use leads, if you use leads well, you can set custom properties on leads. So you can say, what was the campaign that converted this lead to a lead? Like the rule we have in place is that our marketing team creates all leads. So sales can create a lead. But like for the most part, most of our leads are coming from marketing. So like they are creating those leads. They are associating the first touch contact. And then when we convert it to a deal, then we know what was the campaign that initially created this lead. Now, obviously, there's probably someone who's going to argue with me that first touch attribution is the worst attribution, which it is. But like like it's better than nothing at this point. Like that's my view on attribution. Like knowing something is better than nothing. So it's like we're kind of like building that stuff up using properties to kind of get us in a place where we can have more discrete data on our attribution work. And I think
Yes.
that's the power of properties.
Yeah.
The more we're adding, they're now adding properties to campaigns. You can do custom properties on campaigns. I was just talking to a PM about campaign reporting the other day. That was something that came up is that they're trying to build in. You can now do, if you haven't already, you can build campaign reports now inside of Custom Report Builder. It does have, I will say, it does have its flaws. One of them being simply it doesn't handle attribution well. Um, It attributes to everything. So if you are on the equal attribution model, great. But it's not great. It's a bit a little wonky on some things, but you can at least run reports and see like how many contacts are created on like buckets of campaigns. Like I think it's right now a lot of the campaign reporting is campaign focused, whereas it's per campaign. Whereas like we work in a business where like we might do 6 or 7 webinars a month. I want to look at webinars as a whole, not webinars as individuals. So I think there's a lot of stuff, and that's all coming with properties. So as we see
Yeah.
things develop, and these new objects come out, and object library develops, and you get new properties that you can now introduce, I think it's gonna be really interesting, and I think there's a big road ahead for that.
Yeah. There's the opportunities there for you to get really granular with your data, create really actionable insights. And it's basically objects so that you can create data tables, and the properties are what are filling those data tables. And it like I'm pretty sure every audit tutorial or guide or whatever I've ever seen is just go right to the property settings area. And this first step, like just go look, see where it's used, see what's filled, see what's like
Yeah,
like if you don't understand that structure, like that is the one of the few things you can actually have 100% of control as an admin is
yeah,
is awareness of your property set. HubSpot still finds ways to make that challenging sometimes as they add new stuff, right?
yeah,
And that's where I'm trying to work with that team to be like, all right, all these data templates are great, but when I click go and you're creating a property that duplicates this other property that already exists, like built in, like that's not,
yeah.
can we not do that maybe? Or at least call it something different than the same thing that the other property is called,
Well, yeah. I like the
right?
the battle that we just had this week, which was how do you transition one property to another? Like if you have something that you've used for a long time and you have a ton of data on it, what is the best way to transition that? If you're like, hey, I want to change these options. Let's say it's a drop down select. Now maybe I want to do more defined choices. Do you create a new property and deprecate your old one? Do you just change the old one and hope for the best? How are you gonna like what is the best way to do it? And I think it's very dependent on what you're doing. Like you saw earlier, role organization was something that we had like it was very loose, it was very wide categories, and we learned very quickly that wasn't gonna work. So now we're moving to a new version that is more finite categories. We already tested this, that's why we're moving to a new property. But one of the projects I have on my plate right now is to go back and run a workflow that's like, okay, let me go fuzzy match people to this new property so that we're not losing that data. And with the respect of like we're no longer going to use this property um in the future, but I still have the data for now. So you need to go back and check it. And setting up expectations of when that I think it's silly to archive stuff out the gate. I think sometimes you want to hold on to it and like just set yourself a reminder of to use a project mentor like we use Asana. Like I'll set a reminder in Asana like, hey, you deprecated this property and in 30 days you need to remove it. So like that can use that reminder of, hey, this property is no longer in use. Have we done everything we need to do to get the data that was here into the right new property or whatever, and then get rid of it. But that way you can stay on top of your properties because it's just very easy to just build, 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 and then not look back and go, whoops, we have 500 properties.
Yeah. And if you're an organizational leader or, you know, somebody who may not be in charge of the HubSpots, somebody is, like, you need to understand that too, because what just happened where this fifth admin comes in and now there's all these contacts and you're hiring this person and you ask them to do this thing, which seems like just help us clean up the data. Like that is the most, oh man, that is the most trap ask like that any admin I think runs into. It's like,
I
oh,
feel
can
like
you
I'd
just help us
never,
clean up this data?
if anyone wants to start an agency that's just data cleanup, that's entirely what your agency does. I mean, there's a huge market share for it. I remember seeing a post on LinkedIn the other day that was like, is the HubSpot agency partner agency market getting too saturated? And I was like, I don't know if it is because I think like for a long time HubSpot agencies have been very focused. Like rarely do you get like an a company, an agency come in that can do everything well. Like a lot, I think there's it's usually you'll get someone's like rev ops focused, or they're implementation focused, or they're marketing a lot of times marketing focused agencies. I think if someone was to come in and just be like, hey, I'll just come in and for like $50 a month, we'll just come and clean your properties up. Like that is, I don't know if that's a terrible agency model, and even though I'm not an agency owner,
Well, honestly,
you hear them all screaming at me.
this is why people think Operations Hub is the best hub. Uh, like it should be a requirement. And if you suck at administration, which most companies do,
Yeah,
this is how you can be allowed to continue sucking because
yeah,
you could set up Ops Hub in a way that will, do a lot of this work for you. And I think that's where it's out the most amount of time and effort is hidden whenever we talk about migrations or
yeah,
anything like that. And a lot of it's because we can't you you can try to outsource that, but this is why the best companies start with, okay, we're doing discovery where I got to learn about your business if you expect me to clean up these properties in a way that's not going to
yeah,
piss off half your team or lose a bunch of valuable data, right?
yeah,
Or have to like continually walk it back, like two steps back, one step forward.
yeah,
That stuff happens all the time. And that's the kind of stuff that takes, oh, I don't understand why we can't just export and import. Like that could be done in a few days. It's like, yeah, it could be,
yeah,
but now we just have bad data from here and now it's over here too, right?
yeah. You
How good
polish a
are we
turd,
at
it's
doing
still a
that?
turd. You
Right.
know, like that's I love that phrase. I use that phrase so many times when I'm on calls with clients. I'm like, I will take your money and I will happily move it over, but you won't be happy with the output. But if that's what you want to do, we'll do it for you. But you're not going to get any value out of it. And like I firmly believe that there's a strong case to be made that value should be driven from your goals and not from the bottom line today. I think a lot of companies go into HubSpot and they, especially smaller companies that get HubSpot, like they very much just like, I just need you to build me a sales pipeline. I just need you to build me a reporting dashboard. I just need you to build me a ticket pipeline. And I'm like, yeah, I
I
can build you a
just
ticket
need.
pipeline. I just need, no, you don't. I need
Yeah.
to understand your
Do you?
business. And well, my thing is, I love when people come to me and they'll say, hey, can you build me a ticket pipeline? I'm like, yeah, I can build you a ticket pipeline, but is that actually what you need? Tell me
Hmm.
more about what you're trying to do.
Yep.
And they get all grumpy. Like, you don't know what, like, I just need you to build, like, if you want someone to go build your ticket pipeline, go in Fiverr. There's probably someone somewhere in the world that will do it for 20 bucks an hour. That's not going to solve your problem. You'll be back here in a month or 2 months or 3 months going, why is that in my data make sense? Why can't I report on this? Because you built something with no context and you built something with no forward scale plan in place. Um, I think that's the strongest thing is like
Yeah.
properties are the root of that. And if you don't do the discovery correctly, you will not get to a place where like the HubSpot becomes a helper and not a hindrance.
Yeah. My one experience, and then we'll close it up, is my one experience this year was, somebody sends me a possible opportunity, and the excerpt is like, basically, we're not looking for a discovery. We don't need an audit. We're just looking for somebody who can build some workflows. Like, so you want somebody to not know anything about your business, not come into your portal and understand the data model
Mhm.
and build some workflows? Like the most, the thing that probably needs to know that the most, like there's lots of stuff I could probably build out in HubSpot by just going looking up best practices and stuff like that
Right.
and build it out, and it's gonna be hard to like risk a bunch of bad things happening.
It's gonna be one size fits most.
Right. Workflows,
Yeah.
not that thing. Not one of
No.
those things. Like, and that's why I'm not even I'm very upfront with people, like reporting and workflows, not my strong suits, because usually we get into the portal and it's like, oh, you're not ready for any of that. Like, what's the point of doing that when your data
Yeah.
model's not set, when your percentages of
Yeah.
data fill are at like 10%, right? That's so much like, okay, we know what we want. Let's build this workflow. It's going to reference this property and we're going to use this. And then you get there and it's like, oh, none of this stuff's filled in. I guess nothing's gonna fire then. Why do we only have 10 deals enrolled? It should be all the deals.
Yeah. My favorite is usually followed by my favorite, which is like, we just need a workflow. And I'm like, cool. What criteria do you need to roll it on? Like, all the deals. And I'm like, so close loss? Well, no. And I'm like, okay, so here we go. Like it's
Yeah,
not like, so we roll every deal. Every deal. You have 500 deals that span 5 years. You want me to roll every deal in this workflow to like send them an update? I don't think you do.
yeah,
Um, and we all know, I think we both live this world where you've done a workflow, you turn it on, you've done everything, you've checked it, you've tested it, you've made sure like there's always like there's one deal that somehow sneaks in there that like causes a riot, and you're like, ah, you have to go back and like backtrack a little bit, but I think there's just so much value in just taking the time to understand the basics. And I I don't know why people feel so short-sighted in doing that. And I think it's the difference between like the HubSpot ecosystem and the Salesforce ecosystem to some extent, is like the big Salesforce consultancy agencies that exist all start with like, we have to do discovery. We have to do discovery. Like they won't even engage you in a conversation about pricing until they do discovery. Whether the discovery is correct or not, different conversation for a different day. But like they'll do the discovery. Like, whereas like there's house agencies that will do discovery, but there's also house agencies that just like they'll just go and they'll do things. And I'm like, yeah, you can plug and play. Like there's certain things you're able to take from one portal to another portal, but like everyone handles state differently. Everyone handles emails differently. Like you go to one customer who's like consumer based, so you're dealing constantly in like the Gmail, Yahoo, AOL emails. But then you go to someone who's business based and dealing primarily just in business emails. Like there's just so many variances across the board that I just think you have to do that discovery. You have to. And like it's
yeah.
also like a conversation for another day is my feeling on audits. 'Cause it's like one of those things, like I have a hot take on audits. Because I
Okay.
feel like there are a lot of information that is usually unactionable.
Right. Yeah.
And like,
Oh,
yeah,
you've got
I have
this many
strong feelings on it.
properties. Oh, cool. Thank you.
Did you know
You've
you
got
could use
this many
ABM?
this.
I am a medical company targeting patients. Like it's never gonna I have that example recently where someone got an audit and they're like, "You guys are paying for ABM and you're not using it. Everyone's using ABM." I'm like, it would
Uh,
never work for them. They're targeting humans. They're not targeting businesses. But like they put it in the audit, so like now they're like considering, can we do ABM? And I'm like, no, no, like you're never gonna be able to do ABM. Like it's not like it's never gonna be a function that's gonna work for you. You can turn it on, but like you're not gonna understand why it's there. So I think there's yeah. Now I'm not getting my high hopes.
that
We'll be here for
sounds
another
like,
hour if I talk about
yeah.
audits.
No, that
That's a
sounds like
conversation between
next
like
week.
me and you and Dan. Like we need to get a couple of people and like have a nice little conversation about audits.
Yeah, no, that is a good idea because we did talk about that was one of the first episodes with Danielle, uh, which was like um, people say right out front, like, I don't want an audit, like all the things that means, and why it's not a great place to start any relationship. But yeah, man, this has been fun as always.
Yes,
You know, I'm sure everybody, if you just right after you stopped listening, just go look at your properties. Go and look at the ones you haven't, um, maybe seen in a while. Go look at which property sets are available. Sometimes that's the best way to discover a new object in HubSpot and
yeah.
find these places to pop up, right? Maybe do an export of the properties
Maybe
if
go
you want
check
to
how
look
many
at
don't
them
have a
all at the
description.
same time. Yeah, yeah. Find those opportunities and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody.
Take care, everyone.